Hey guys, welcome to the last two assignments you have in my class. And I'm actually going to be able to get them out a little earlier. I said I wasn't going to be able to do it till Wednesday, but I'd like to go ahead and knock it out. I've got this, and then I've got one more set of videos to do for my sophomores, and I'll have everything done, and it's just grading at that point. So most of you are doing fairly well on getting your grades caught up and in, and I appreciate that. There's a couple of you still dragging though, and please take advantage. These two poems are very easy. The questions are easy. If you're watching the videos, I'm basically giving you the answers. So take advantage of that. It takes 10 minutes to do these questions. Let's bag that laziness for just a little bit and get this part of your life, this chapter closed, man. You don't want to have to come back and do it again. So, or maybe some of you do. I don't know. We need to move on. You guys need to do. We've got bigger and better things on the horizon, and I'd like you to get there. Okay. So we're going to start today with a poem. It's the longer of the two A.E. Housman poems we're going to do. It's called "To an Athlete Dying Young." And if you read the notes on Housman, Housman's a pretty dark poet, kind of like Hardy was, but I mean, he's got some. This was just common this time period of writing, to be honest with you. So we're going to look at "To an Athlete Dying Young," and the title holds a lot for this poem. I mean, it's literally about an athlete who has died at a very young age. So I mean, and that's going to have big bearing on this, guys. Poetry's titles matter. You really want to pay attention. Now, of course, if it says Sonnet 15, that doesn't matter, but the ones that have literal titles, actual, like, well, they all have literal titles, but the ones who have actual, like, worded titles that aren't in a sequence, then you definitely want to pay attention. All right. So we're going to read the whole thing. Last time for Hardy, I kind of discussed it as we went. I'm going to read the whole thing to you once, and then we're going to go back and look at it. Okay. It says, "The time you won your town the race, we chaired you through the marketplace. Man and boy stood cheering by, and home we brought you, shoulder high. Today the road all runners come, shoulder high we bring you home, and set you at your threshold down, townsman of a stiller town. Smart lad to slip betimes away from fields where glory does not stay, and early though the laurel grows, it withers quicker than the rose. Eyes the shady night has shut cannot see the record cut, and silence sounds no worse than cheers after earth has stopped the ears. Now you will not swell the rout of lads that wore their honors out, runners whom renown outran and the name died before the man. So set before its echoes fade the fleet foot on the sill of shade, and hold to the low lintel up that still defended challenge cup. And round that early laureled head will flock to gaze the strengthless dead, and find unwithered on its curls the garland briefer than a girl's." Now, it's a very pretty poem. It's got a Now, most of you have told me that, if you didn't have the videos and explanation, most of you wouldn't be able to get it. Guys, the last few stanzas of this are very difficult. The first few are not. But you have to be able to think. That's poetry. Poetry is not passive. It's active. You have to think about what you're seeing. So look, the very first stanza, he's describing, the guy won a race and they're carrying him home, cheering him on. The second stanza, and to be honest with you, the beauty of the poem comes in these first two stanzas, and the way he juxtaposes two very different events that involve the same thing. Second one, he's being carried again, but this time it says, "Today the road all runners come." Well, what's the road all runners come down? Well, they all died. This man is being carried to his grave now. Think about pallbearers. So, we got this image of him being carried home after winning this race to being carried to his death, which, again, if you look biblically, the idea of we talk about running the race, and that's of life. And this guy, so basically he's, won two races here. And so you would think that normally when we have this kind of stanza, this type of poetry, that it would be, lamenting the death of this great athlete. But that's not what Housman's doing. He's actually praising him for dying young. Now, that's kind of a weird statement, right? Well, let's see why. When he says, "Smart lad to slip betimes away from fields where glory does not stay," he's saying, good job pulling it off. You died early because, and then he points out something about glory. Now, one of your questions asked about his specific take on athletes. That's to come. That's not this. This is for everyone. He's like, the glory we earn on earth doesn't stay, okay? And this is one of the important things, again, about, and I know I work in faith stuff several times in these, and I don't want to, any of you who maybe don't share my beliefs, I'm not trying to offend you, but I want to point out, the angle I'm approaching this from. People who are people of faith realize that we know earthly glory is not lasting, and we know that there is, but it matters still. See, Hausman doesn't seem to be playing with that in the back of his mind. He's like, smart to get away from here where glory doesn't stay. He knows it doesn't. All right. Now, I asked you in the questions about two things, laurels and rose. Now, roses are commonly used in poetry to indicate youth because, rose is very beautiful for a short time and then it fades. And the same thing with our lives. You have this brief period of time where you're young and, your body works properly and everything goes the way it's supposed to. And at your peak of your strength and your good looks. And then as you get older, that does fade a little bit. Some of us, it fades more than others, but you definitely. So the rose there is to represent youth and in that thing. The laurel is the one that most of you probably have no idea about. And those of you who didn't watch the video, obviously you're not going to hear this, but good to those of you who are watching it, because the rest of you had to sit and look up what a laurel is or had to get someone else to tell you who did watch the video, which I want to stress again, don't tell people, all right? A laurel is the wreath they used to put on the head of winners of a race. It goes back to ancient Greek and Roman times. That was the flower that represented that. So he says, and early though the laurel grows, it withers quicker than the rose. He's pointing out that the glory of winning fades a lot quicker. I mean, think about, if your favorite team has ever won a championship. I know a lot of you are probably Alabama fans, and, you cheer on, even Nick Saban makes points about, like, you get excited about winning that championship, but during the summer you start planning for the next year. I mean, it doesn't last long. That glory doesn't. If I ask you right now who won the college football championship in 2010, most of you would be like, oh, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it was Alabama then. They win it every single year, it seems, anyway. But, that fades quickly and the next winter comes along and you fade out. I remember all these great athletes that were a big deal when I was growing up that you guys wouldn't even know their names, most of you. I loved basketball when I was a kid. And, one of my favorite players was my favorite player was Charles Barkley. Most of you probably know him, especially since he came from Alabama. But I loved a guy named Shawn Kemp. Most of you have no clue who that was. And for a while, he was one of the best players in the NBA. But that fades quickly. All right. Think about how great Todd Gurley as a runner was just a few years ago and how he's kind of an afterthought to people now. So that's kind of what he's pointing out here. He says, your youth fades, but, glory fades even quicker. And there's more. If I had more time and we were in class, I would develop more about, how this really applies today with athletes. So think about how the shine comes off of this athlete that you think's amazing. Ezekiel Elliott, when he first comes out of college and is this just superstar stud runner, but then all the nonsense that followed him around afterwards and how that kind of lowers his honor and how it quickly, it impacts how people feel about you. Okay, so then we keep going with the last four stanzas are where we start to get a lot more poetic language. And this is where you might struggle. But guys, if you got the first three stanzas, you don't have problems. You know what the poem's about. A. Hausman is talking about how, dying young is actually a positive for, especially for athletes. All right, now, I put in your questions, and I want to note this with you. This is not an encouragement that, hey, I hope you die young. You shouldn't. I believe a fulfilled, long life is the way to go. You can't impact the world if you die at 24. All right. I mean, you can, but you have a lot more chance to do that if you live longer. And I don't mean just impact the world. I mean, impact the people you love. I mean, if you were to die at 24, more than likely both of your parents are still going to be alive. So they have to deal with the death of a child. You may be married and have a young wife or young husband and young children. And to leave them is just, it's horrible. Let me take it from me, a person who, just as recently as last week was having to face this concept. Now, I'm not young. I'm not super old, but I'm 42. But the idea, I have a 12-year-old at home. I have a wife who I've been married to for a while. And the thought of leaving them definitely was an issue. And, there's no way I would, sacrifice my years I have with them and the ones I have ahead, hopefully, for dying back when I was still, strong and, could, play a whole game of basketball without nearly dying. So, I don't think I agree with Hausman here, but I do see his point. Now, you can see someone's point and still not agree with their final premise here. All right. Now, the other question that was asked was about what he's saying specifically about athletes. And that's found in let me see which stanza is this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th stanza. It says, now you will not swell the rout of lads who wore their honors out, runners whom renown outran and name died before the man. He's pointing out that particularly for athletes, that glory is very short-lived. All right. and that honor runs out, and actually your name kind of loses all meaning. Guys, go back and look. Take 10 years back and look at, pick whatever, those of you who like sports, whatever your favorite sport is, baseball, basketball, football, whatever, and look at the all-star team from that year and notice how many names you have no idea who they were. At one point, these were the best players in the world, and now, and like just 10 years later, they've been forgotten. Really, to be honest, some of them were forgotten 2 or 3 years later. That still happens to me now. I still love basketball, but I'll look at, during the free agent season when they're signing different players, and they're like, so-and-so, an all-star from 2018. I'm like, who is this guy? I mean, I've already forgotten him. So that's kind of the point Hausman's making here is, while yes, dying young is good, it's especially good for athletes who, that put all that effort into that one, that game or that race or whatever, and how quickly it's forgotten. And, it's also a comment on us, how quickly we forget these things, how quickly we're, how quickly we bestow honors and then forget all about them and just move on to the next person. And, there's solace in that, to realize that, if you don't achieve your goal, if you don't win the championship, if you don't win the race, then yes, that's sad, but also remember that it doesn't end your life. Because to be honest with you, these things are so temporary. It's great in the moment, but in the end, it just, the honor doesn't last. Okay, so like I said, kind of dark poem. I only gave you 4 questions because it was really tough to come up with a 5th one. So, okay, I'm going to stop here. I'm going to do another video, which is going to be very short, for the other poem from Hausman that we have, which is called When I Was 1 in 20, which is only 2 stanzas long, but I like it a little better. It's a little less dark. It's still got kind of a pessimistic view of life, but it's much more clever, in my opinion. So I hope you enjoy this poem. I saved the 4 last final poems, the 2 Hardy poems and 2 Hausman poems for you, because I thought they were the best, and I really wanted to end on something strong, okay? So, all right, I'm going to make my last video for you here in just a minute, and I hope you guys have enjoyed this poem, and I hope you enjoy the next one. All right, so let's hit the stop, and I'll see you again for the next video.